As demonstrated on Wednesday by signing Shaquill Griffin, John Schneider's never been afraid to improve his roster between the end of the offseason program and training camp. Could a trade be in the works? And if so, which trade should John Schneider be attempting to make here in the next month? I'm going to be dishing out 4 proposals here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
12, this is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, whether you're in Issaquah, Washington, or Sturgis, Michigan. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We are a month away from the start of training camp at the VMAC. John Schneider just added Shaquill Griffin in free agency. Could a trade potentially be in the works over the next 3 or 4 weeks? I'm going to be taking a look at 4 trades that John Schneider should be attempting to make heading towards the start of training camp as the Seahawks look to improve their roster. We've got a Thursday mailbag, and I'll be dishing out my 5 sleepers to watch going into the 2025 season. Without further ado, let's get to it. Now for your lead story here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. It is not unusual for John Schneider this time of year, what's called the dead zone between the end of the offseason program and training camp, to make roster moves. Most of the time, it comes in the form of signing veteran free agents. We saw that on Wednesday. Veteran Shaquill Griffin coming back to Seattle for a second stint in the secondary. Those are the type of moves that normally are made, but we've also seen John Schneider make trades, obviously extensions this time of year. This is the hot spot for him to extend players that have 1 year left in their contract. Wouldn't be surprising if we got a couple contracts that are going to be coming down the line, but this is the kind of time of year that we've seen John Schneider make trades, including the Jamal Adams deal, and obviously that did not play out the way the Seahawks hoped it would with the injuries Jamal Adams dealt with, but still, the point remains. John Schneider's been willing to explore the possibility of trades this time of year. Jadeveon Clowney coming from the Texans before training camp as well. There has been a number of deals that John Schneider has made during June, July, even early August to make his roster better before the upcoming season. And I think when you look at who could potentially be available, and I'm going to throw 4 names out there, some that are going to be obvious and others maybe that fans haven't been considering, that at least based on discussions that I've had with sources from their respective teams could be possibilities for the Seahawks as far as trades that John Schneider should be trying to make. And let's start off with the one that isn't new. We've talked about this quite a bit to this point. Trey Hendrickson in Cincinnati. Yes, there's been reports he's training in Cincinnati, but where else is he going to be training at right now? That's normally where he is at. That does not mean that he is suddenly okay or content with his situation. He still wants a new contract. The Cincinnati Bengals have not been willing to give the money that he believes he's worth. And look, the guy's had at least 17 sacks each of the last 2 years, double-digit sacks for the last 5. He's had a ton of pressure, so he isn't just a sack accumulator. The guy is as good of a pass rusher as you're going to find in today's NFL. And I've been arguing there is no such thing as having too many pass rushers. I know Seattle signed DeMarcus Lawrence. They're hoping Uchenna Nwosu is going to be back healthy. Boy, Mafe, Derek Hall coming back. That is a really solid stable if all 4 of those guys are healthy, but you've got some older players. You've got guys that have dealt with injury concerns. And then beyond this year, you've got even more question marks. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't try to see if you could get Trey Hendrickson. Now, I'm not giving up a first-round pick for him, and that doesn't mean he's not worth a first-rounder in terms of value, but because he is north of 30 years old, and the Seahawks are going to have to give him a massive contract, I would not be willing to give up anything more than a second-round pick. In fact, to me, a second-round pick swapped directly for Trey Hendrickson. Maybe you can add a 7th if you're looking to spice things up. But I think that that is a fair deal, considering his age, the fact he's got 1 year left in his contract, and you're going to have to pay him a massive deal. So you've got the investments both financially and draft pick wise. That is still, to me, the sweet spot. And Seattle is one of the teams, and according to a source that I spoke with, a Bengals source, that this is one team, Seattle, that absolutely could maybe get this to the finish line if the Bengals enter the territory where they're willing to potentially move Trey Hendrickson. And that has been the biggest issue to this point, is the Bengals have not indicated any signs that they are going to be willing to trade him because he's still got a year left in the deal. They're going to play hardball. We'll see where things are at. This might be something that doesn't actually happen until we get into training camp. If he's holding out, it could turn into a situation where the Bengals decide, all right, it's time for us to move him. We'll have to wait and see on this. But that is still a trade. I know there's a lot of people saying, well, does that really move the needle? Yes, it does. Trey Hendrickson is that kind of a player. To me, a top 3 pass rusher in the NFL. Pass rushing, defensive line, that wins Super Bowls. It didn't stop the Eagles from going out and acquiring players last year. Seattle's got to have that same mindset, in my opinion. Now, I would have mentioned Jalen Ramsey here, but after signing Shaquill Griffin, I've taken that trade off the board. I don't see Seattle now going out and making that move. So let's go to the offensive line, a position that a lot of Seahawks fans still think is a major area of concern. Did Seattle do enough, even after drafting Gray Zabel? You don't know who your starting right guard is. I have a solution to that problem. If you don't think Christian Haynes, if you're not completely confident Christian Haynes is the guy, or Anthony Bradford, or Satawa Lamea, and you don't like the free agents out there, you've got 2 coaches that know the New Orleans Saints really well. The Saints, they have perpetually had cap issues they've been dealing with, and at some point they are going to have to move off some players to try to clean that salary cap up. So I'm proposing this. New Orleans moves a former first-rounder in Cesar Ruiz, who had his best season as an NFL player a year ago with New Orleans, with John Benton, working alongside Clint Kubiak. He had a great zone blocking grade, and an incredibly athletic guy coming out of Michigan. He tested very well. My argument is to trade a 5th-round pick and Christian Haynes. You're giving the Saints a young player that's got a rookie contract. You just extended Ruiz before the 2023 season. He's been pretty good, but he up to last year was not great. He had some issues with consistency. That might be something, if you are able to get the right draft compensation and you include a promising young lineman that's on a rookie contract, you might be able to get the Saints to at least listen. At the same time, as my source indicated, Kellen Moore is coming from Philadelphia, and he knows how important the offensive line is. So there may not be any way that this happens, but I would at least be calling, because I think Ruiz, you can plug him in at right guard and you've got your guy there. He's only 26. I think that can be your long-term starter across from Gray Zabel. Now suddenly you've got a really intriguing interior offensive line, regardless of who ends up playing center for you. Swinging back to the defensive side of the football, this isn't the first time that I've thrown this idea out, but I still look at Mazi Smith, formerly of Michigan, where he played for Mike McDonald in 2021. Mazi Smith has had a disappointing first 2 years in the NFL with the Dallas Cowboys, to the point that I was told a couple of 7th-rounders and undrafted players in Dallas could be competing with him for snaps at the nose tackle position, or even as a rotational 3-tech. I look at Smith's athleticism at his size, almost 340 pounds, how productive he was at Michigan. Mike McDonald, to me, is the guy, and Adam Durde worked with him his first year. I think the coaching staff's in place for Seattle to be able to resurrect this player a little bit. And I don't know that the Cowboys necessarily are going to be in a position where they are going to be just holding out hope this guy figures things out. Jerry Jones has moved on from first-rounders quickly. Before we saw it with Taco Charlton back in the day. Did not play well his first 2 years. They moved off of him. Could Mazi Smith be that next guy? I think Seattle still has a need there at the nose tackle position, short and long term. Go get Mazi Smith and see if it works out. I think you can get him 4th-round pick, maybe 5th, even, if the Cowboys are that willing to move on from him. But we'll see. That is one that I think we have to watch going to camp, where he stands with this new coaching staff. And the last one I'm going to throw out here, this is a name that I hadn't been thinking about, because quite frankly, he's coming off a torn ACL. And he has had some injury issues all 3 years he's been in the NFL. But Christian Watson has been one of the best field stretching receivers when he's been healthy. He averaged over 20 yards per reception last year for the Green Bay Packers. The Packers just drafted Matthew Golden in the 1st round, though, the speedy receiver out of Texas. They later added Savion Williams in day 2, another player that's got good speed, can do some things out of the backfield, running the football. And they've got a couple other returning receivers from the last few years. They're still excited about it. I just don't know where he fits in. Now, I've talked to a couple of people that are sourced with the Green Bay Packers that have great insight on where that team's at. And Matt LaFleur loves this kid. So it might not even be on the table. At the same time, if the right offer is put out there, to me, the right offer for a guy that's coming off an ACL and he's got 1 year left in his contract, I'm looking at a day 3 pick, maybe an early day 3, and doing a pick swap for a late day 3, something like that to me would be the right deal. Is that the right deal, though, for the Packers to move off from him? That remains to be seen. But I think that is a player that, everything I've been told, he's ahead of schedule from his ACL tear, that he's doing well, has a good chance to be ready for early in the season. Seattle still needs a long-term field stretcher after trading DK Metcalf. I don't see Marquez Valdes-Scantling being that guy. Maybe it's Torrey Horton, but we'll have to see on that front. I don't have any issue with having Torrey Horton and Christian Watson both on your roster, and he's on a rookie deal still. I think that this is one where you can give up a day 3 pick, do a swap, and just see where this guy fits in coming back for that injury that I think would at least be worth looking at. When we come back, we've got mailbag questions coming from you, our valued listeners. I'll be answering as many of those as I can coming up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Monarch Money. Ever wished managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in just one place. So you stop managing your money and start building wealth. When I first started using Monarch, I could not believe how much I was spending on pizza delivery. Maybe I should have believed it because I love pizza, but now I'm budgeting smarter and saving more on other expenses that pop up in my life. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you could use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money by using the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith, riding solo. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in. As always, thanks so much for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Time to open up the mailbag. Got a ton of questions from you. You, our valued 12, is going to tackle as many of those as we can. So let's kick it off here. The first question I've got coming from DK owns you on X. Well, hopefully he's not owning the Seahawks now that he's in a Steelers uniform. Question is, how much better would the Seahawks defense get if Byron Murphy is allowed more 3-tech reps instead of playing mostly nose and Jarran Reed playing the nose as a possibility at all? So I talked about this some last year, and I know the Seahawks were having kind of a tricky time with this with Byron Murphy II, just because of how effective Leonard Williams and Jarran Reed were in that 3-tech role. And they were just looking for ways to get Byron Murphy II on the field. But I think when you read through the tea leaves, it's clearly evident that Mike Macdonald this year, he wants to unlock that athleticism and pass rushing potential in Byron Murphy II. Jarran Reed can still be a key player for this team for the next couple of years. He's still a very solid player. But Byron Murphy II has all of this untapped potential that you want to take advantage of, especially when he's on his rookie contract, and you want to see him maximize on his talents in this scheme. I do think Seattle's defense, that is one of the things that we have to have answers for yet this year to know just how good this defense can be. But if Byron Murphy II is playing more in that 3-tech role, he had a really solid pass rush win rate last year and a pressure rate. He just didn't have enough opportunities, especially rushing on early downs from the 3-tech spot. If Seattle can give him more of those chances, and maybe that involves Jarran Reed playing more at the nose, and he has shown in the past he's capable. I think at the end of his career, that might be something that he is more adept at doing at this point. It gives this defense another extremely athletic player that can do damage and penetrate. And I still think this guy can be a productive pass rusher. We didn't see it with sacks and quarterback hits last year, but give him more opportunities, particularly on passing downs. I think that is one of the keys here to really unlocking the full potential of this defense. I think they can absolutely be a top 3 defense if Byron Murphy II pops in year 2 and he's getting more opportunities at that 3 tech position. David Carter on X, does the presence of Shaq Griffin put pressure on Riq Woolen to step his game up to retain his starting position? So I don't think Shaquill Griffin is coming into town to go after Riq Woolen's starting job, but I do think that you can make the argument from a contractual perspective. The Seahawks are bringing him in as another experienced veteran that has played a lot of games in the NFL, has athleticism, has some interceptions, pass breakups in his career, and now he's a 8-year vet. Bringing that kind of a player in to see if Griffin can really bring the entire group up, and Woolen being part of that. Is Woolen going to respond to that? Is he going to lean on Griffin now as that seasoned vet that has seen everything, that can help him improve his game? I think those are the things they're going to be looking at more so than, well, we have Shaq Griffin here to potentially take Riq Woolen's job. I don't think Seattle's looking at it from that perspective. It would be more that number 3 cornerback position. However, the way that Riq Woolen responds to this, having another veteran that can push him, and what he does off of that, I think it could play into the evaluation of whether or not the Seahawks are going to potentially give him another contract. And if Shaq Griffin is right on his heels, Seattle might say, look, we haven't seen the jump the last 3 years from Riq Woolen, and it could tell him we can get by with a cheaper option there next year than overspending to re-sign Riq Woolen. So I could see there being domino effects, but I don't see this as Shaq Griffin coming in and trying to take Riq Woolen's job. I don't see this signing being that particular instance, more so than the 3 spot behind Woolen and Devin Witherspoon. Phil Birnbaum on X, on a scale of 1 to 10, what are the odds Jadeveon Clowney signs with the Seahawks? I'm still going to say 7. I still think that there is a really good chance that this happens because of his familiarity with this defense, how well he played for Mike McDonald. I think he still wants to play. I don't think he's going to be overly expensive to sign on a 1-year deal. You don't need him to be a superhero or a starter. You need him to be a competent rotational piece that can defend the run, use his length, and give you some pass rushing contributions rotating into the lineup. I still think there is a very good chance this happens. You've now got Shaquill Griffin signed. That's not going to eat up a ton of that cap space that you had left over. You've got plenty of room to go out and get Jadeveon Clowney. And unless you're trading for Trey Hendrickson, that might be the best option you have to further reinforce that edge group going into the 2025 season. Marty on Blue Sky, this is a great question. If you had to predict now, is Noah Fant still the Seahawks' #1 tight end when the season starts? And what are the odds he's not anymore? How would he lose his job? So we've got a 3-part question here. Right now, I think that there's a good chance that Noah Fant is starting in week 1, but I think Seattle's going to be using a lot of 2 tight end sets. So you could have him and A.J. Barner both listed as the starters, which gives some ambiguity, into who the #1 tight end is. And snap counts might not even necessarily illustrate that with the way game flow works. I think he's still going to be a starter. At this point, look, if you have a team that has a tight end injury and you're really impressed with Elijah Arroyo, A.J. Barner takes the next step, and you feel like, okay, we can keep Eric Salbert as our 3 tight end or Brady Russell, and Seattle feels like they can move Noah Fant and get some cap space opened up. Not that they need to do that. Maybe there's a circumstance where another team could come in and give an offer for a draft pick or something that they're willing to do. But I think at this point, if Seattle was going to move him, I think they would have done it long ago. I think that Clint Kubiak's got excitement about Noah Fant. And now Elijah Arroyo is kind of that Noah Fant in waiting, and maybe they're going to use him a lot as a rookie too. We'll see. But I think there's still some optimism and excitement that they can get quite a bit out of Noah Fant in this offense, especially with some of the receivers that have left. There's going to be more opportunities potentially for him to catch the football. So I don't know if he's a starter all year long. Maybe he's a trade deadline candidate potentially. We have to see how a lot of these dominoes fall. But I actually at this point would be pretty surprised. I think if they would have moved him, they probably would have done it at this point. As far as how he loses the job, if he just doesn't have a good training camp and the other guys are better, then I don't think the Seahawks will have any issue with moving A.J. Barner or Elijah Arroyo ahead of him. I don't think that there would be any issue doing that with a guy that's got 1 year left on his contract. I think they'd be more than willing to do that if competition shows he's their 2nd or 3rd best tight end. Then I think that they would do that regardless of how much he is costing against the cap in 2025. Zeke on X, Do you think Anthony Bradford will manage to get on the field in Kubiak's scheme, considering how poorly he played last year? Or would it be better for us to trade him by the deadline if Haynes becomes the obvious choice next to Zabel and Olu? So I think if they're going to move Anthony Bradford, I actually think that in training camp, after training camp preseason, Bradford could be a guy, because a lot of teams in the league are just like the Seahawks and they're struggling to find offensive linemen. There's a scarcity there across the board. There's plenty of teams that could use help at guard. And I think there's a lot of offenses that are a better fit for a 330 plus pound player like Bradford, whose game has been more predicated on power to this point. He's got some good athletic traits for a player that size, but it hasn't always lended itself to on-field production, particularly with zone blocking. I still question whether he's going to be able to fit there. The Seahawks look like they're going to have a competition still going between him and Haynes, but if Haynes wins that job, as I think he's going to, then I think you could see Seattle potentially dangling him to some teams that could be using guard reinforcements, and they could have Haynes and Satoa Lamea as their two guys at right guard and go from there. We'll have to wait and see on that front, but I think Bradford, if he's going to get moved, it's probably something that you're looking at before the start of the season to an offensive line needy team. Wrapping up our mailbag here, Elo Tato on X. Do you think Nehemiah Pritchett was drafted to be a developmental replacement if Reek Woolen were to depart this next offseason? And if yes, what's your comfort level with that idea? I think anytime that you draft a corner on day 3 that has 4.3 speed and has some length, I think you're always looking at the possibility of developing that player into a starter down the line. That doesn't mean that the Seahawks were going into last year thinking we have to absolutely have Reek Woolen's replacement ready on this roster, but he does have some traits and athleticism that offer some similarities that mirror some of the ways that Reek Woolen plays the game. And, you know, he's coming from an SEC school, he's got more experience at corner, but to an extent, there is a similar pathway there, both being 5th round picks. I don't know that Seattle drafted him with that necessarily being the sole thing in mind, but you're always looking at guys like that you can develop with the possibility, yeah, we're not going to be able to pay everybody. There might be a player like Reek Woolen that we decide the price point is too high for what we think we're getting in him. Let's move forward Nehemiah Pritchett. I need to see how he performs in training camp in the preseason before I can really answer that last part, because if we're basing it off of what I saw last year in the limited amount of time on defense, he's going to have to make some big strides for me to be confident. I think he can get there. I think he does have a lot of traits that can be molded. He's got some peskiness to him, but he's going to have to show that he can improve as a tackler, and he is going to have to be more consistent with his assignments and coverage. If he can't make that significant leap, it's hard to have confidence. Well, that guy could play out there as a starter on Sundays, particularly against somebody like Reek Woolen, who has been a Pro Bowler, has been a Defensive Rookie of the Year finalist. That might be a tough cliff to get me to climb up as far as being confident from that perspective. When we come back, the Seahawks will have training camp opening on July 23rd. Who are the 5 sleepers that we're not talking about enough heading into the upcoming season for Seattle? I'm going to dish out my sleepers coming up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Rouette. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rouette Ready. Rouette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue, and it kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked for you, Rouette might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. You can even read real customer reviews on their site. It's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. Head to Rougiette.com/LockedInNFL and use the code LockedInNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedInNFL and use the promo code LockedInNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiette website for full safety information. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith, riding solo today. A special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in, and thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. And for your second listen, make sure to check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. The NFL Draft long in the rearview mirror, but roster moves and news never stop. Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan of this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We are closing in on the start of Seahawks training camp. We're actually technically less than a month away here. On the 26th of June, the Seahawks open on July 23rd at the VMAC. And all offseason long, you're going to be talking about the big name stars. We've talked tons about Devin Witherspoon and Leonard Williams, the newcomers like Sam Darnold and Cooper Kupp. There's all these big name players that we spend so much time talking about. But for the Seahawks to be able to win the NFC West, to get over that hump after missing the playoffs the last 2 years, winning 9 and 10 games the last 2 seasons respectively, you're also going to need some unsung players to step up. And that always leads me to the word sleeper. And I think that when you're looking at that term, I think there's a little bit of differentiation with the way that some people look at that and define it. For me, a sleeper is somebody that has talent, is a good fit, and maybe just isn't getting talked about, or the importance of that player is not being talked about enough. And I want to kick things off at the receiver position with a guy that Rob Rang and I talked about in our 90 rundown yesterday, who we finally got to see play in a few regular season games last year for the Seahawks. And I don't know what it is about Cody White. I can tell you this from watching training camp practices, watching OTAs and mandatory mini camp. There's just something endearing about this kid. He gets after it. He is a guy that when he gets his opportunities, he seems to take full advantage of them. We saw it against the Rams in that Week 9 overtime loss last year where he drew a pass interference penalty downfield. He had a big catch on a deep ball from Geno Smith. We saw him make a couple plays on special teams. Cody White has that selflessness and he has that versatility, a guy that played a ton of different sports and was a high school all-state player in a number of sports. He's got size, he's athletic, maybe not the fastest guy you're going to find, but he just plays the game the right way. And he was getting quite a few first-team reps in mandatory minicamp. I take that with a grain of salt, but I do know this is a guy last year, kind of in the same vein with Kobe Bryant, didn't get the playing time that Kobe Bryant ultimately did, but he's a player that unprompted a few times Mike Macdonald talked about with the way that he practices, how he carries himself. And anytime I hear that with Mike Macdonald, I start to think this is a guy that maybe we are sleeping on, that has a chance to maybe be one of their 5 or 6 receivers this year. I don't know if he can get the job done, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does. So that's my first sleeper. Going to the offensive line, my second sleeper. And part of this is because of what I mentioned earlier with Anthony Bradford. I know that right now the competition at right guard, it is Christian Haynes versus Anthony Bradford, just like it was last year. Like, this is the competition that just won't end, it feels like. And those are the two that are trying to battle for that starting job, playing for John Benton and Clint Kubiak's offense. But Seattle Seahawks played pretty well in the 6 games. I know PFF gave him a terrible pass protection grade, and he had some missed opportunities in that regard. But Seattle's run game was much better when he checked into the lineup for the last 6 games. And I thought you saw some improvement from him as a pass protector as he got more experience. This is a guy that was not even dressing up to that point, and then he got thrown into the starting lineup. But he was a 4-year starter at Utah. He's been an all Pac-12 player multiple times, playing guard and tackle. And he's a guy that I think we've kind of forgotten a little bit about with how he played the end of last year. I could see when the pads come back out and this coaching staff's had a little bit more time. Right now, they may be perfectly content with him being the backup left guard behind Gray Zabel and giving them some positional flexibility, being able to play both those spots. But I think there's a chance we could see him re-enter that right guard competition, especially if Bradford is not able to hang with Christian Haynes, or that becomes one of those battles where it feels like a stalemate and somebody's not seizing it. Let's throw somebody else in there. LaMea is still a guy that I absolutely could see stepping up to the plate if given the opportunity again to play a lot of snaps for the Seahawks. Now, let's go to the defensive side of the ball. And the first play I'm going to throw out here, this is going to surprise some people that I'm putting a guy that had the production that Derek Hall last year had on this list. But I even will say for our podcast, it's not been a slight on Derek Hall at all. But there's been a lot of talk about Uchenna Nwosu coming back. There's been talk about Boye Mafe and his contract situation. He's going to be a free agent next year. The Seahawks pay him. You bring in DeMarcus Lawrence, who's a very good player, 4-time Pro Bowler. He's been an All-Pro before, is going to bring some experience, some physicality, some nastiness to this edge group. But Derek Hall had 8 sacks last year. Derek Hall returned a fumble for a touchdown against the Atlanta Falcons. He was a guy that was incredibly active, and it felt like in the second half, his production dipped off. And it was the first year that he played extensive snaps. And I think you see that a lot of time with young players. But Derek Hall is a guy that it does feel like everybody's just kind of forgetting what he did last year. And, you could even make the argument for people like me that are saying, go out and sign Jadeveon Clowney. He and Clowney are not the same player. And I still think you can have 5 guys in your edge rushing rotation that are all impactful. But Derek Hall is a guy that could absolutely be one of the 2 best. He could end up being a starter for this football team because he's physical, he gets after it, he's tough-minded, has that explosive first step, and he's a finisher. When he gets to the quarterback, he gets his hands on guys and he gets them to the ground. That's been the biggest issue for Boye Mafe. He's let a lot of sacks slip out of his grasp. Derek Hall, when he gets his hands on you, you're going down. And his pursuit, running guys down, we saw him do it against the Dolphins a couple times last year. Just incredible motor that he brings to the table. We haven't been talking about him enough. I can see Derek Hall. This is more from a sleeper standpoint. We're sleeping on him being a breakout star this year for the Seattle Seahawks. So I think Derek Hall is absolutely somebody that we are not talking about enough that we should be after the way he played last year. Going to the secondary, a player that I have talked about quite a bit since OTAs and minicamp. I'm a big fan of what I've seen from DeAnthony Bell to this point. He is a guy that brings size to the equation. He's 6'2", 209 pounds. And when he's had his opportunities in the league, I thought he was the first or second best safety at times for the Cleveland Browns on the film that I watched in games that he got to play the last couple of years. And what I loved about him is he was not afraid to mix it up in the run game and use his size. He had some ball production playing as a single and 2 high safety. He has that positional flexibility that Mike McDonald demands at the safety spot. He's also been a really good special teams player. Nick Emenwari coming in to go with Kobe Bryant and Julian Love. It's going to make it difficult for Bell to get a lot of snaps on defense, and yet at the same time, you go into dime, I can see 4 safeties on the field. And Mike McDonald, it wouldn't be 4, and he did it a few times in Baltimore. DeAnthony Bell has enough talent to be able to do that. He did sign him to a 2-year deal, which was telling to me as well that they saw him being a guy that they could make a piece, not just on special teams, but a piece of the puzzle as a situational sub-package defender. And if you have injuries, God forbid, he's a guy that has proven he can start in the league. And so I think he's somebody that is going to be on this football team. I would be stunned if he's not on the 53-man roster. And I think he's going to play some on defense as well as being a core special teams player. Keep an eye on DeAnthony Bell, number 23 in that stacked safety group. And the last player here, Steven Sims Jr., he's bounced around the league. He's been with the Commanders, the Texans, the Ravens. He's been all over the place. But he has been productive as a kick and punt returner. He returned a punt for a touchdown for the Texans against the Ravens in the wild card round a few years ago. He's got that kind of dynamic playmaking ability. And he showed in minicamp. I'm telling you, the second minicamp practice, I swear Steven Sims Jr. had the football in his hand, half the plays from scrimmage. He was plucking everything, had 3 touchdowns that day. Is he going to get to do that with Sam Darnold? That remains to be seen. But if he's able to continue showing, I mean, this is a guy his rookie year, especially with Washington, he had decent pass catching numbers as a 3rd, 4th receiver for the Commanders. If you can get any contributions from him on that front, and he's clearly your number 1 punt returner, he's a talented kick returner, he's on this roster if he's able to do that. So Steven Sims Jr., he is going to bring experience and proven talent as a return man to Seattle special teams. Has a really good chance to, you could have 6 or 7 receivers on the roster if special teams plays into it And he is a guy that could absolutely be that core special teamer as a return specialist, while also occasionally getting on the field on offense if he can continue to show that he's a reliable pass catcher in Clint Kubiak's offense. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, it's Blue Friday. I'll be joined by Nick Lee. The two of us will be dishing out some insight on Seattle's rookies and their second-year players going into the season. We're going to have some predictions on that front as well. Should be a really fun episode. Make sure that you are listening in and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Go Hawks.